They say this is a big rich town. I just come from the poet's part. Bright light city.
Right, carrying on with question 4. Question 4 we can see our functions. So the first thing to do is to read the information on the top. The figure below shows functions f and g defined as that and that. So you need to know these things off by heart so that you're able to identify them. So give it some thought and consider, what is f of x? Is that a parabola? Is it exponential? Is it hyperbola? What is it? Is it a circle? Okay, these are things you need to consider before you start the question. Also, look at the diagram. Highlight where the y-axis is and the x-axis. When your eyes are not looking in the right places, it can all seem somewhat confusing. So do highlight the y and the x-axis first before starting with the question. Right, so the first thing, looking at the f of x, this would be in that form. Okay, so because it doesn't have a c value at the end, this means that the y-intercept would be 0. Okay, and if looking at the graph, you can clearly see that the parabola is cutting at 0, 0. So this means the y-intercept is 0. So f of x is definitely a parabola in this form given here. Right, and g of x is b to the x plus q, and we know this is the exponential function. So looking at the graph, you can clearly see an asymptote there with the dashed line in the diagram. You can see that that's definitely an exponential function because of the asymptote y equals -8 listed here on the screen. Right, so the first one we said is a parabola and the second one is an exponential function. Right, so coming down 411, we're going to start the first question. Write down the numerical value of k. So where would you get this value of k? So remember that the q value is the shift, and here they are giving you plus k. So practically they want the q value, right? So looking at the graph, can you get that value for me? Yes. Right, it is the asymptote. So k is equal to -8. Right, looking at the next question, 412. Determine the x-intercepts of graph f. Now graph f is this one here, which is the parabola. They say you must find the x-intercepts. So already just looking at it, we know one x-intercept is definitely 0. We can see that already. Right, but let's calculate it. And f of x is equal to -x squared minus 4x. That is given. So to find the x-intercepts, we know that we have to let y equal to 0. And then factorize it by taking out a common factor of x. What will be left is x plus 4 in the bracket. Then this will be the 0 factor rule. So the x on the outside will definitely be 0. And the x in the bracket will be -4. Right, the next question, 413. So 413, the question says determine the coordinates of b. So remember, coordinates mean that there must be two numbers, an x and a y value. So 413, they want the x-intercept. How do we know it's an x-intercept? This is where the exponential function is crossing the x-axis. Therefore, it's an x-intercept. The exponential function is cutting the graph, cutting the Cartesian plane at x. Right, so for x-intercepts, let y equal 0. Right, so substitute y 0. Bring the -8 over. You will get +8. Break 8 into a base of 2. You'll get 2 to the 3. Equate the exponents. X is equal to 3. Simple like that. But now we must write that as a coordinate. So that's going to be 3 and 0. The next question, 414. Determine the coordinates of the turning points of f. So notice the graph of f is the parabola. That will be the turning point of f. In other words, you have to calculate point C. So f of x is equal to that which is given. And to find the turning point, all you have to do is do a derivative. Okay. First derivative. And let that first derivative equal 0. So that f of x, do derivative there. And next thing, let it equal 0. Right, so f prime x, how we got this, place the 2 in front, we're going to get minus 2x. Don't forget, where there's a x to the power 1, they fall away. And so we're going to get minus 2x minus 4. Right. And then we're going to let that equal to 0. Solve for x. Bring minus 2x over to the left hand side. We're going to get positive 2x. Divide both sides by 2. We're going to get x is equal to minus 2. Now we need to substitute x is equal to minus 2 into the original equation. So the original equation was given, and substituting into that equation, we will then get the answer. So notice we substituted x equals minus 2 into the original equation. So minus 2 squared is a positive 4. There's that same negative there. So this is how we get minus 4. Minus 4 minus 2 times minus 2 will give us plus 8. So 8 minus 4 is 4. Right, and this is how we get it. Now to write the coordinates of the turning point, that's two numbers. It will be minus 2 and 4. That is the final answer. Minus 2 and 4 as the turning point. Right, and that's the point C. For all of that, it was 4 marks. Another way you can work that out is by using x is equal to x1 plus x2. So the two x-intercepts divided by 2, which will give us the average distance of those 2 points. So all you have to do is substitute those x values which are there. Notice you had 1 already given above, which you worked out. So the one was 0 and the other one was minus 4 on the left hand side. So substituting minus 4 plus 0 divided by 2, you will get the same answer of x equals minus 2. Notice the same answer. So we did calculate that a value, the x-intercept above. Alright. Right, so the next question is 415. They say find the length of CD. So CD is from there to there. So if I want to know how long this is, this means at the first step, I will need to substitute that x value from there to there. I'll need to substitute that distance from there to there between the 2 pins into this graph here, the exponential function, so that I can find the distance of point D. Okay, so I'll need to find point D, and that way I will know what's the distance on that graph, right? So let's go and substitute there. Right, so notice that that x value of C was minus 2. So that's how we know that's minus 2. So substituting into the parabola, that will give me that distance. So minus 2 is the x value. So substituting into the exponential function, not the parabola, substituting into the exponential function, 2 to the minus 2 plus the k was minus 8, which we did above. That's going to give us an answer of minus 32 over 4. Do note we substituted minus 2, and as a result we get negative 31 over 4, which will now be the y value. So the x is minus 2, which was substituted, minus 2, and the answer was y, and so this is how we get the coordinates. Right, next we need to find point C. So point C will be minus 2 and 4. Right, so point C is minus 2 and 4. How do we know point C is minus 2 and 4? Very simple. How? It was the turning point calculated before. Right, so look at your previous answer. Point C was minus 2 and 4. That's how we got that. So now if you have 2 points, C and D, the question says determine the lengths of CD. So that's from there to there. This means we're going to have to use the distance formula, right? So substituting into the distance formula, okay, there is an easier way to do this actually. All you have to do is add up the distances of your y values and you're going to get the same answer. Okay, but I know sometimes people don't understand that one. So practically, if the y value here was 4, so 4 plus that y value, take it as a positive though, right? So distance is always positive, so that means from there to there is 31 divided by 4. So 31 divided by 4 plus 4, and that should be your answer of CD. Okay, but if we use the distance formula, if we had to, then we'll substitute these 2 points, right? And first we're going to use D as 0.1. So substituting 0.1, which is minus 2 and negative 31 over 4. Those are 0.1s, x1, y1. So that's x1 and y1. Substitute. And then point C. The formula both has negatives. And point C is the point minus 2 and 4. So substituting minus 2 and 4. We take out a calculator. Minus 2 plus 2 is going to give us 0. So that's going to be 0 squared. Minus 31 over 4 minus 4. Square it. This will become positive. So if you add those two numbers, just that number and that number, you should get 47 over 4. Alright, and that will be the final answer. So because this answer, we square it, it now becomes a positive 47 over 4. And the square root of a square root and a square is going to cancel. Right, so our answer is 47 over 4, which is 11,75 units. Right, and that's how long CD is. Right, so if you look at that question, it's only 2 marks, so I think there was no need to do this distance formula. You could just add up those 2 numbers. You can try it on a calculator and see if you get the same answer. Right, the next question says the range of F. Right, so notice in the previous question we calculated the full length of CD. Now they want the range of F. Okay, so the range of F, what does that mean? So this means we have a maximum value, which is that turning point. So that turning point is at a maximum, even though the graph is sulking. So when the graph sulks, it produces a maximum turning point. Just remember that by looking at the graph. Right, so for the maximum turning point, we know that the maximum number there is a y value, which was 4. We got this from the turning point. Okay, so the turning points, we had it listed. Right, and that means y must be less than or equal to 4 at that point. So another way to write that, this bottom part is heading into negative infinity, as you can see by the arrow in black, negative infinity. And this is going to give us including 4. Right, so the range includes 4 because at C it is exactly 4. So it's including 4. So you can choose one of those 2 notations. Don't forget, y is the element of real numbers. Y is less than or equal to 4. That's the proper notation for that one. But this is a far easier notation to use, quicker. Right, the next I want the equation of the straight line. So the straight line is that one there, BC. Notice before we did calculate B and we did calculate C, which means we do have both those points. Refreshing us, it was 3 and 0 for B. C was minus 2 and 4. So using the distance formula, not the distance formula, the gradient formula, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, we can then substitute into the equation, substituting B as 0.2 or C as 0.2, it's up to you, but I'm going to use B as 0.2. This means y is 0 and x is 3. So substituting y is 0, x is 3, And on the other side for point 1, y is 4 and x is minus 2. 0 minus 4 is minus 4, and 3 minus minus 2 is going to be 5. Our answer here is negative 4 over 5. Notice at this point you haven't found the equation. You only found the gradient. So we still have to continue. Y is equal to mx plus c. So if you look at on top of the screen, we need to find point C. We do have the gradient, which is minus 4 over 5. And then we're going to substitute the point 0 and 3. If you substitute the points minus 2 and 4, you won't be wrong, right? So when I say the point 0 and 3, don't get me mistaken, it's the point 3 and 0, but y is 0, right? So if you substitute this point C, you will substitute 4 there and minus 2 there. Okay, you'll get the same answer. So no worries. Right, plus C. Why do we substitute those points? Because those points are on the line. And any point on the line, that's what a function is. So multiplying those two numbers, I'll get minus 12 over 5 and take it over to the other side. So C is equal to 12 over 5. At this point, we are still not complete. We need to write the equation. So equations are y is equal to minus 4 over 5, which was the m value, x plus the c value, 12 over 5. Right, so for all of that, only 3 marks. Right, so surely you don't have to show all that calculation, y is equal to mx plus c. As long as you just put that part as your first one, get your value, there's it there. Year 2, you don't have to write the equation because only 3 marks to substitute. Okay, but it's nice to write the equation so that you don't make a mistake. Right, let's go to the next one. 4.2. 4.2, identify the function. If you look at it, px is equal to, right? This is what? Semicircle. How do you know it's a semicircle? There's no plus and minus in front. Instead, it's a negative. Or if it's only a plus and no minus, this means it's a semicircle. If it's a minus and no plus, it's a semicircle. If there's nothing there in front, it's a circle. Okay, so when it is the negative or the positive only, this means it's a semicircle. And if it's a negative, it'll be below the line. So write it in the standard form. This will be the standard form. This means r squared is equal to 81. Solving for r, you'll get 2 answers, plus minus 9. Alright, so remember that the radius goes right through, okay? When you make a circle, it goes on both sides of the x-axis and both sides of the y-axis. But because this is a negative semicircle, that's going to be below the x-axis, right? And so putting it onto our Cartesian plane, we'll have negative 9 plus 9, and the y at the bottom on the y-axis will be minus 9. Drawing our circle, there's our semicircle there. Simple like that. But it's best to write the coordinates on the graph. Those are the x-axis coordinates, the x-intercepts, and the y-intercepts. There's it there. Best to write the coordinates. For something like this, it is 3 marks. 2 marks for the x and the y-axis. And for the shape of the graph, if you drew it below the line, 1 mark. If you drew it above the line, you're going to lose 2 marks. You're only going to get 1 for the 2 x-intercepts. But if you drew it below the line, this means your y-intercept is also correct. And this way you would get 3 marks and not 1. Okay, so it must be below the line because of the negative. If it was plus, it would be above the line. Right, next we're going into the financial maths. We're looking at depreciation. Right, so the question there is on the screen, and you need to just read it very quickly and to see what you can see concerning that question. Right, this question says Wayne purchased a motorbike at the beginning of 2019 for 120,000. The motorbike depreciated at an annual rate of 12% according to the reducing balance method. Calculate the depreciation value of the motorbike at the beginning of 2025. So notice that given the years here, 2019 and 2025, they haven't given you the value of n. Now, depreciation formula, what does it mean to depreciate? You buy a car for 200,000, after so many years the car's going to be worth nothing. So depreciation means it is losing value. So that means it's the compound interest formula, but not with a plus sign, but with a negative sign, because why? It is losing value. So given in this question, they tell us that the principal amount is 120,000. This is how much the motorbike was bought for. Okay, and then we use the depreciation formula, which is A is equal to P 1 minus I. Now normally compound interest formula is exactly the same, but with a plus in the center, not a minus. So just remember, depreciation is compound interest but with a negative in the center. Right, now substitute your P value, 1 minus, what is the I? Now the I is the decimal interest rate. If you look at here, R is 12%, it is not divided by 100. You need to divide it by 100 or substitute it like that. Now the N we are going to have to calculate because they gave us 2 years. The year there was 2019 and 2024. So subtract the 2 years with a calculator, 2024 minus 2019, you will get the answer 5. So this means N is equal to 5. Using your calculator, you will need to punch in the bracket first. 1 subtract, open bracket, 12 divided by 100. Right? You will get this answer, and then you're going to put it to the power 5. Putting it to the power 5, punching in equal to, leave all that decimal perfectly how it is, and multiply that full decimal by 120,000. In this step, you must never round off, and multiply it by 120,000. You will get the answer on the screen. Now, final answer must be rounded to 2 decimal places. So in this case, because it follows a 0, it'll be 83. If it was a 5, it'll be 84. Okay, if it's a 4, it'll be 83. If it's a 5, it'll be 84. Does that make sense? Right, and this is depreciation 5.1. Right, 521 says Mr. Rapo or Rapu won 80,000 from Hollywood Bets after predicting UEFA Champions League final winner. He invested his winnings in an account paying 8,000 interest per annum, compounded quarterly. At the end of 2 years, the interest rate changed to 9% per annum, compounded monthly. So 521 says calculate the effective annual interest rate equivalent to the 9% interest rate compounded monthly. So you're going to have to look at the first part of the question, which is that 800,000. Okay, that's where it's going to start. So notice they want us only to convert the rate, okay, for 521. So forget the whole story on the top. That's going to be applicable later in the question. What's applicable now is that effective interest rate, right, equivalent to a 9% interest rate compounded monthly. So we're going to have to use the formula for converting effective interest rates. So the interest rate here is 9%, and that's all you need to continue, right? For 521. Compounded monthly is also important, and that's our formula. Right, so it's 1 plus I over M, which is the term, minus 1. Right, so we're going to substitute our value there. For I, don't forget it's the decimal interest rate, which is I. So this means it's going to be 9 divided by 100. So 9 divided by 100 will give us 0.09. Substitute it into the formula and then minus 1. So put the whole bracket first. Don't forget the exponent. Right. So punching it in, that answer on the screen is wrong. Don't forget to put to the power 12, and this is what we'll do. The whole bracket first, to the power 12 equals, that's what we'll get for the bracket, minus 1, and this is what we'll get as an answer. Don't forget that answer is not in a percentage. Okay, so we need to take that answer and multiply it by 100, and now it will be a percentage, 9,38. Okay, so multiply by 100, we'll get 9,38 as our final answer. Okay, to look at the calculator screen and you will see the answer there, 9,38. And that is our final answer, percentage, 9,38%. Right, the next question talks about a withdrawal. So notice this is something what they call timelines, and you can read this up in a grade 10 maths book, also grade 11 pure maths textbook, right? But if you go to a normal grade 10 pure maths textbook, the examples there are quite easy to understand. And if you go back to your grade 11 book, we did do this in grade 11 using grade 10 examples. Right, so withdraw. So remember here you're going to use the compound interest formula. Now the only thing changing in this question is the rate. Okay, so the rate is changing. So if you read the question again, it says Mr. Rapu won so much, 800,000, invested his winnings in an account paying 8% interest per annum, compounded quarterly. At the end of 2 years, the interest rate changed to 9% per annum, compounded monthly. Okay, so you can see now that only the rate is changing. Now 5 to 2, the question says at the bottom, he made a withdrawal of 200,000 at the end of the 3rd year to cover the purchase cost of his new car. So he buys a car now, you with me, for 200,000. So this means when he withdraws this money, he's going to lose his interest also. So that's something you must realize. Never subtract the 200,000, but also the interest. Right, let's look at the question. So the principal amount is 800,000, 1 plus, and now we have to look at the interest rate. So notice the interest rate, it says, is 8% interest per annum compounded quarterly. So quarterly means divide by 4. Okay, so it was 8%, 8 divided by 100 will give me 0,08. The question said compounded quarterly. This means divide by 4. But I need to know what period was this money in the account. Okay, if you read the question very nicely, you'll have to know that the whole investment period was for 5 years. But the question says at the end of 2 years, the rate changed. You see? So this is why we are substituting 2, because the rate changed at the end of 2 years. So this money was sitting there in the account, it was never withdrawn, but the interest rate changed after 2 years. So that means this money at 8% was sitting at this interest rate, 8% for 2 years. Now, whatever you divide by, if it was compounded quarterly, so quarters mean cut into 4. So if it was divide by 4, this means you're going to multiply the power also by 4, right? And then you're going to set up another bracket like this on the side. So 1 plus, and now the interest rate changes to 9%. So 9 divided by 100 is 0,09. And what is the period now? The period is different. It's divided monthly. There are 12 months in a year. What is the time frame that's remaining for 5 years? So the whole thing is being invested for 5 years. So this means if there's 2 years here at this interest rate, that means there's 3 years remaining for the next part. Okay, so it's going to be 3. Whatever I see in the denominator, I multiply it there in the exponent. Okay, so this one is quarterly, and this one is monthly. Okay, put all that in a bracket and write that answer over there. Take your calculator, take your time, do it twice because the calculator will mess you up. Okay, put your answer there. You can tell me later. So now, don't forget that this person withdraws 2,000 to buy a car. Now, when he withdraws this 2,000, he's also going to lose interest on that 2,000. That's how it works. So, notice we're dealing with a withdrawal, and this is why it is negative. Minus 200,000, but he must also lose his interest. Now, notice it says that he withdraws this money at the end of the 3rd year. So after 3 years, do you understand why it's called timelines, these questions? So after 3 years, he withdraws this money. At what interest rate is it? Okay, so notice in this 3-year period, when he takes the money out, this is the orange line. When he takes the money out, you have to ask yourself, what is the compounding year and what is the interest rate? So the interest rate is 9% in that time frame. Okay, because after 2 years, the interest rate had changed to 9%. 9% compounded monthly was now the new agreement. So it is 9%, 9 divided by 100. This is how we got 0,09 divided by 12. Now what is the remaining time? Think about it. Look at the timeline. From there to there is 2 years. From there to there, from there to there is 3 years. What is left? Do you see it's 2 years? Right? So it's going to be 2 years. So this mister, because he pulled out his money here, he's going to lose that 200,000. It's going to be taken out plus the interest that he would have gained if he had kept it for 5 years. Does that make sense? So whatever's in the denominator, which is 12, I'm going to multiply my exponents also by 12. Now guys, you are going to work out this whole bracket here using your calculator carefully and put that number there. Then this number minus that number will give us the final answer. This is the most accurate way to do this on your calculator. Right, these are the two numbers that I got. Right, so these are the numbers that I worked. Hopefully you have the same ones, and this is my final answer. Okay, don't forget to round off to 2 decimal places. 59 will be our final answer. Right, going on to the question 6. Question 6 is first principles, and this is our question we get. Right, so question 6.1 is the question. So we have to use the formula of first principles, and the formula of first principles is fx plus h minus f of x all over h. That is our formula. Now if you look at f of x is equal to all of this, to go and put this here and substitute x plus h where x is, that's going to be kind of tiresome. The best thing to do would be to multiply this out using the distributive method. So half times 3x, half times 1, and you will get this. Now you're going to substitute f of x, x plus h, f of x plus h where x is. And so this is the method. So notice 3 over 2, x plus h will go where x is. So substituted, and then what is f of x? Notice f of x is equal to all of this. So minus all of this, what you see. Does that make sense? Right? And so you're going to put all of that. So there's the plus half, and substitute f of x into all of that. Don't forget there's a negative here, and that negative will affect this first term, and it's going to affect the second term. So this will become, and all of that's over h. So what's going to happen? We're going to say 3 over 2 times x is 3x over 2, and 3 over 2 times h will be 3h over 2. We are multiplying there, plus the half. Okay, so in the next step, you can do that negative part as I have explained. Right, so we're going to get opposite signs there. Right, so both those positives are going to become negatives, right? And all of that is over h. But we can see we have like terms. Those two are going to cancel each other, and those two are going to cancel each other. They have the exact same values with opposite signs. So they have the exact same values but with opposite signs, and the only thing remaining there is 3h over 2, which is over h, right? So now as h approaches 0, but before we can do h approaches 0, do you see that this h and this h are going to cancel each other out? What is left? 3 over 2. Now if you were to not use first principles and just do a derivative on that original question, what would you get? So don't forget that the constants will just fall away. The x would fall away, and you would have 3 over 2. So to get the answer of 3 over 2, perfectly correct. Right, let's go to 6.21. This question that we just did is 5 marks. Right, 621, y is equal to square root of x, and all of that in brackets. What will be the easiest thing to do is to write that square root x as an exponent, x to the half, and then multiply it by everything within the bracket. Now x to the half and x squared causes a lot of confusion. A lot of people would just think that that is x, because what they're doing, they basically just multiplying those two powers. They're saying a half times 2 is 1. That is totally wrong. Don't forget, we're multiplying the same bases. We add the exponents. So adding the exponents is a half plus 2. A half plus 2 will give me 2.5. 2 times 2 is 4 plus 1 is 5. This will give me 5 over 2. So my exponent there, when I add those exponents, is going to give me 5 over 2. Then multiply x to the half times negative 7. This will give me negative 7x to the half. Now dy over dx, this means I need to differentiate over there. So doing differentiation on that expression, this means I must bring 5 over 2 to the front of x and subtract 1 from the exponent. This will give me 3 over 2. The same thing with the second term. Bring the half to the front and then subtract 1 from the exponent. This will give me negative half. I can now simplify this to make it look nicer. Minus 7 over 2, x to the minus half, and writing the negative half like a positive exponent, it would be this. Right, remember that x to the half is the square root of x, and then I have to push it down to make it look positive. At that moment, x to the minus half is a numerator. So x to the minus half would be the square root of x, but in the denominator because of the negative. Right, 622. This is the question given. This is 2x minus x to the fifth over x squared, right? And then we can split that up. Right, do notice that the denominator is x squared. So split it up is the first step. Then simplify it. X to the 1, x to the 2. Subtract the exponents. I'm going to have x to the minus 1. X to the 5, x to the 2, subtract the exponents, x to the third. Now I can carry on with derivatives. So moving that minus 1 to the front and subtracting 1 from the exponents, I'll get minus 1 times 2x to the minus 2 minus 3x. Right, you agree? Right, so we'll get minus 2x to the minus 2 minus plus x squared. This should be 2x squared. Okay, so the 3 goes in the front. This will be 3x squared. Right, so here we have minus 2 in the numerator, x to the positive 2 in the denominator, because x to the minus 2 was pushed down, minus 3x squared. Right, so notice the 3 was the exponents, the 3 came to the front, it became minus 3. 3 minus 1 is 2, so minus 3x squared. So f prime x, if f of x is equal to all of that. So notice here we are doing derivatives on x. We're going to do a derivative on this. But before we do that, let's first write it in a way that is very easy. So the cube root of x is best written as x to the third. That's our first step. Now f prime x will get pi plus, bring that 1/3 to the front and subtract 1 from the exponents. What will my exponent be? Minus 2 over 3. Right? Writing that in a more simplified manner, it'll be 1 over 3. Right? X is in the denominator. It's the cube root of x to the power 2. Right? And that's the most simplest form of writing the answer. Right, the next one is 6.3, average gradients. Now the average gradient is the gradient between 2 points. Okay, so most times here they give you 2 x values. You have to take the x values, substitute it into the equation to find the y values. So g of x is equal to 3x squared plus x. Substitute the 2 x values that were given. In the question 6.3, they gave x is equal to minus 1 and x is equal to 1. So substituting minus 1, right, and 1, this is what we will get. So minus 1 squared is 1, 3 times 1 is 3, 3 minus 1 is 2, right? 3 times 1 is 3 plus 1 is 4, right? Now we get coordinates. Notice we substituted minus 1 on the left, the answer was 2. On the right hand side we substituted 1, the answer was 4. And so now we have 2 coordinates. Now we will use the gradient formula to substitute these 2 points. So this is the gradient formula, change in y over the change in x's. So that's x and y. I'm going to use the point on the left as my first point. This will give me 2 over minus 1. The other points is 4 and 1. 2 minus 4 is minus 2. And minus 1 is minus 2. So minus 2 over minus 2 gives me a positive 1. Right, the next question, question 6. We have f of x is equal to minus x cubed plus 10x squared minus 17x minus 28. So this is the question on the left hand side, right? So most times they don't give you the factors here, right? This question that gave the factors, they normally don't. So you have to find the factors. So you can use your calculator, but I'm going to show you the full way of how to do it, right? So you have to guess f of minus 1 or f of 1 as a starting point. So I'm going to substitute f of 1 to determine if minus 1 will give me an answer of 0. If it gives me an answer of 0, this means that x plus 1 is a factor. Alright, so this is why I substitute minus 1 to determine if x plus 1 is a factor. So substituting minus 1 into the regional equation, this is the answer I get. So minus negative 1 cubed, on a calculator that's 1, right? Plus 10. Negative 17 times minus 1 is a positive 17 minus 28. Plugged it into a calculator, you get 0. So if I substituted f of minus 1, get an answer of 0, this means I have a factor. My factor is therefore x plus 1 is a factor. So this means I can use my synthetic division. X plus 1 is a factor, so that means my number is minus 1 that I substituted. Write it there. Then go back to the original question and take all the numbers in front of x cubed, x squared, x, and the constant. List them there. Next thing, bring down the very first one, minus 1. Write it there. Now our method here is to multiply, okay, and write it down. Right, so our method is to multiply and write it. Okay, so minus 1 times minus 1 is 1. The next step is to add. So plus 10 plus 1 is plus 11. Right, then we're going to multiply minus 1 times 11, which will give us minus 11. The next step is to add minus 17 and minus 11. That's going to give me minus 28. Then it's minus 1 times minus 28 will give me plus 28. Minus 28 plus 28 is 0. This means that's a factor. So x plus 1 is definitely factor if I end up with a 0 at the end. So the first number is x squared, the second number is x, and the last number is c. So I can put them in a bracket. So the first one was negative 1 x squared, the next one was 11 plus 11 x, and the next one is minus 28. Looks very confusing, doesn't it? Right, let's start again. I'm going to go a little slower. So the first thing I did was to substitute by a guess, f of minus 1. By doing so, I get an answer of 0. I then discover, because I substituted f of minus 1, this means x plus 1, the opposite sign, is a factor. So x plus 1 is a factor. So then I record that x plus 1 was a factor. I use the one that I substituted, the minus 1, and I write down all those numbers in front of the x's and the constant. So far so good? Write them all down. Now the method here is to multiply, then add, but bring down the first number below the line. Minus 1 times minus 1 is 1. So minus 1 times minus 1 is 1. Don't forget the method is to multiply, then add. So 10 plus 1 is 11. Minus 1 times 11 is minus 11. Next step is to multiply, then add. So adding is next. So now I must add these two. Adding those two, minus 17 and minus 11, will give me minus 28. Now minus 1 times minus 28 will give me plus 28. Adding those two, minus 28 and plus 28, because they have opposite signs, same number, 0. This means that x plus 1 is a factor because I have an answer of 0. Now this is x squared, x, and the constant, and I write them in my bracket. X squared, so minus 1 x squared, right, is good, plus 11x minus 28. Is it good? So take out a negative so that this can become positive. It will become a positive x squared, a negative 11, and a positive 28. Take out a negative so that it's easy to factorize. So now we have to factorize this binomial. Looking at factors of 28, think of two numbers that can give you 11 with the same signs. That'll be minus 7 and minus 4. Okay, is it good? Solve for x. Let every bracket equal to 0. Solve for x. A is going to be that point, B is going to be that point, C is going to be that point. Now notice I wrote the factors according to that. The best way to write it is normally the smaller number, the second smallest, and the third smallest. Now if we go back to our diagram, let's look at B and C. If this is 0, that means B has to be a smaller number than C because the x's are increasing in this direction. So this must be for this must be 7. So swap those two around. Okay, and we got, these are our factors. Now if you go to the paper on the top, notice that they gave us the 3 factors already. There was no need to do this. Why I did this is to show you, in case this is not given here, then you're going to have to work it out how I showed you. Right? And now you have your 3 points, A, B, and C. So you got A, B, and C, and those are your x-intercepts. So the very first question wanted us to find the x-intercepts, right? The coordinates of A, B, and C, and now we have them. Right, looking at the next question, 7.2, it says determine the coordinates of G. This is the turning point over there. So to find the turning point, we have to do a derivative on this very first equation that is given to us, f of x. So derivative over there will give us minus 3x squared plus 20x minus 17. Is that good? And the constant will fall away. The next step is to let all of that equal to 0. Okay, and this means you're going to have to factorize here. Okay, so factorizing this, we multiply 3 times 17, and that gives us 51. Now we are going to factorize this, but this is our answer up here. Remember, you must have 3x and x to give you 3x squared. So 17 times 3 is 51, so that means our factors are going to be 17 and 3 with the same signs because of this positive. Remember, when this is a positive, it means that the signs will be the same. And what sign will there be? There will be negative. Negative 17 plus negative 3 gives me negative 20. Negative 17 times negative 3 gives me 51. Those factors are perfect. Now don't forget, we multiplied by 3. You with me? What's the next thing we must do? Divide by 3. So divide both your numbers by 3. If it can simplify, then you write it. If it cannot simplify and you're going to get a decimal, then move the number in front. Okay, so in that case, we're going to get that. And 3 divided by 3 is 1. So our factors there are 3x minus 17, x minus 1. Don't forget, all of that is equal to 0. Let each bracket equal to 0 and solve for x. That's going to give us 17 over 3. So moving minus 17 over, it'll become plus 17 divided by 3. The other one will be x is equal to 1. Now go back to the graph and look at it. Which one will be 1? Don't you think 1 is going to be here? So x is 1. That's the one turning point. And the other turning point is going to be here. Notice we are dealing with G, not with E. So I'm going to take G's answer, which is 17 over 3. So 17 divided by 3 on a calculator, how much does that give you? So if you punch in 17 divided by 3, notice you'll get an answer of 5,66. 5,67 rounded off. So notice that the G is actually 5,67 and the E was 1. So we are speaking about G, right? So we have to use this value, the 17 over 3. So substitute our 17 over 3, okay, into it there. We're calculating the turning point, and where we're going to substitute the 17 over 3 is into the regional. Notice the power 3. I'm substituting x is equal to 17 over 3 into the original. Okay, substitute into the original question and get an answer for y. The answer is 400 over 27. So G is 17 over 3 or 427 for the y. You can also write that as a decimal if you wish. So 400 divided by 27 will be equal to 14,81. Okay, so 14,81. Right, the next question is asking where is the graph increasing. Now if you go and you look at it, you follow it from left all the way to right, notice the graph only increases between the points E and G. So notice coming down, it is decreasing. Where else is the graph coming down? Notice there it is also decreasing. Right. So the graph only increases in that green regions between E and G. So we know between 1, because we had the value of E, which we calculated above, we said it was 1. So between 1 and 17/3, this is where the graph is increasing. So X is the X values, and between those two values. Okay, so this means X is more than 1, but X is less than 17/3. Does that make sense? Right, so X is the element, curly brackets, and that's our notation. Notice it doesn't include E and G, because at E and G, that is the turning point. It's not increasing and it's not decreasing at the point E and G. So the next question says the equation of the tangents at the points 5 and 13. Okay, so we need to substitute X value there, okay, which is 5. We must substitute for the tangent into f prime x, not into the original. So where? Into f prime x, the one that we derived. So substituting your 5 over there, right? What will your answer be? 8. So all you have to do is substitute 5, get an answer of 8. Now take this 8 and substitute it into y is equal to mx plus c. Notice here you're getting the equation of the tangent. So substitute your point 8, which is your gradient, right? 8 for m, and substitute your other point, which is 5 and 12, where you see x and y. So substituting the point, notice that y is 12 and x is 5. Substituting it into the equation, and 8 being the gradient, I can then find c. 8 times 5 is 40, right? Plus c. Take 40 to the other side, it will become minus 40. So minus 40 plus 12 will be equal to minus 28. Now you need to write it into the equation. So y is equal to the gradient, 8x minus 28. Okay, and now we have the gradient, the equation of the tangent. Notice you had to find the gradient first and then substitute the point and the gradient into y is equal to mx plus c. That will always be the method.